Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Neha Darbe, Faculty Coordinator at SSODL. Welcome you to today's breakout session in the nutrition domain. There is no doubt that the social media is becoming increasingly prevalent in our daily lives and is promoting awareness and consciousness about food and nutrition. Around 2 billion people, almost one third in the global population, suffer from micronutrient deficiencies or hidden hunger. These nutrition deficiencies can contribute to increased morbidity and mortality among the young mother and children. We are aware that poor diet and limited access to nutritious food are among the key reasons why someone may lack crucial micronutrients for human development. Fortifying staple food is an excellent and sustainable solution to improve the nutritional status, particularly among the low income population. Fortified foods are those that have nutrients to improve the nutrition and add health benefits, which are not actually naturally present in them. In this reference, our today's topic for parallel session is food fortification. And to enlighten us on the topic, we have with us Dr. Kavita Menon. Dr. Kavita Menon is presently working as a professor and head of nutrition and dietetics department at Symbiosis Institute of Health Sciences. Dr. Menon, trained as nutritionist, graduated with her MSc and MPhil from Sri Avinashalingam Deemed University, Coimbatore, and PhD from University of Otago, Dunedin, New Zealand. Dr. Menon has 25 years of academic experience in different countries, including India, Malaysia, and New Zealand. Her research interests include maternal and infant nutrition, micronutrient deficiencies, nutritional assessment, nutrient issues of cancer patients, and dietary intake assessment for different populations. The research project focuses mainly on public health nutrition issues such as micronutrient deficiencies in women of reproductive age, infants in India and Malaysia. Ma'am has received numerous national merit scholarships for her postgraduate studies in India, international doctoral scholarships from University of Otago, New Zealand, and Nestle's Nutrition Institute Fellowship, with her further training in maternal and infant nutrition. The School of Health Sciences USM has awarded her with the Best Lecturer and Excellent Service Award for her valuable contributions to university. Dr. Menon has widely published research papers and had several research grants in her field of expertise. I extend a very warm welcome to our esteemed speaker, Dr. Kavita Menon ma'am. A gentle reminder to all delegates in this session to post your queries in the chat box. Ma'am will be addressing those questions towards the end of our session. May I request Dr. Kavita Menon ma'am to kindly enlighten the audience. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Neha. You have set the context very rightly by giving an introduction to the topic, and I really value it. And it's much easier now for me to continue this topic. And thank you for your kind words of introduction. We go ahead with this topic. Now, as Dr. Neha told you, we are going through a stage of hidden hunger, and this pandemic has accentuated the prevalence of those micronutrient deficiencies. So prior to a COVID pandemic that was set in, we had almost 2 billion people in the world, including women and children, who had hidden hunger, which is popularly termed by Food and Agricultural Organization for the deficiencies of micronutrients. Now, the challenge with the low and middle income countries are that there are multiple micronutrient deficiencies that coexist in populations who subsist in a very monotonous kind of a diet. So deficiency of one micronutrient can accentuate the deficiencies of other micronutrients. And there lies the challenge of mitigating the effects of these deficiencies through a single program. The current dietary patterns do not ensure optimum availability of these micronutrients from diet alone. And that is one of the primary reasons that we are considering options to go beyond diet and to improve the health and nutrition status of population. So, to reduce the micronutrient malnutrition, now when I say malnutrition, please don't be under the impression that I'm using only deficiencies. It can include even excess kind of scenarios, which I will be mentioning during my discussion. So if you look at the picture that I'm showing you, you will see that micronutrients are very important in our diets, which are required in very minute quantities, but their availability on a daily basis is something essential to the system for effective functioning, development, and growth. So just to give a prelude before we go into the subject of food fortification, which is a very vast area by itself with a lot of programs that are ongoing now in different countries, both in developed and developing countries, to improve the micronutrient availability. The differences arises on the nature and the type of micronutrient deficiency or excess that you see across these different countries. So if you look at vitamin A and vitamin D, they are actually fat soluble in nature and hence to be very carefully handled. And vitamin A deficiency can lead to night blindness, and we would term it as a kind of preventable strategy to avoid blindness in children. Vitamin D is very important for strong bones. The deficiency of this vitamin D can lead to rickets in children with the classic symptoms of bow legs and beaded chest. The other micronutrients, especially the group of B complex, the most important being deficient are like vitamin B12 and folate, where you will see that they are very much important from the perspective of chronic diseases as well. Not just that they are contributing to the hemopoietic activities as well as preventing the spinal bifida that is occurring in children due to folic acid deficiency. You will see that their role in 1-carbon metabolism is very important in reducing the incidences of chronic diseases. Apart from that, we have the other trace elements, including iron, which is very important to prevent iron deficiency anemia. Please remember, not all anemia is due to iron deficiency, but there could be a concurrent micronutrient malnutrition that you will see in case of coexisting micronutrient deficiencies, including iron, folate, B12, copper, and even iodine, which could contribute to severe anemia in people who are subsisting in diets, poor quality diets in low and middle income countries. And if you take iodine, which is one of the very important micronutrient, it's very important. Even a mild iodine deficiency can have impact on the cognitive development of children. Zinc is very important from the perspective of immunity as well as in terms of growth. And you know that in this kind of scenario of COVID, we often talk about vitamin C and zinc supplements, although we don't have clear evidence that this would actually support in improving the status or in preventing the risk of these infectious diseases. The other micronutrients popularly you will see deficient in majority of the populations is thiamine, riboflavin, which are and niacin, pyridoxine. These are part of B complex vitamins and they are very much important in appropriate energy released from the food. For example, if you are consuming a carbohydrate-rich diet, normally you need to have adequate amount of these nutrients for its use and effective conversion to energy, deficiency of which will lead to fatigue and lethargy in people, leading to a kind of apathy, and that is important to be prevented in populations. Let me give you a perspective of the micronutrient deficiencies recognized in different continents across the globe. If you look at Southeast Asia, which is very important to note, you will see that out of the 3 important deficiencies that are outlined here, anemia, around 57% of the population have anemia. and 40% of the population are iodine deficient. And you will see that among preschool children, 69% of them are vitamin A deficient. This scenario exists heavily in the low and middle income countries. But if you look at the Western scenario, you will see that the iodine deficiency remains as a predominant preventable kind of a preventable preventable cause for mental retardation or poor cognitive development. Now, I have been talking about micronutrient malnutrition or deficiencies. What actually causes this malnutrition? This is something important to understand. Why I say this is that we have different types of underlying causes, or I would say causative mechanism that leads to micronutrient malnutrition. Some are basic causes, which will include inadequate access to healthcare services, inadequate financial and human resources, and socio-cultural, economic, and political context of any country. Without much of political will, you cannot drive or improve the nutrition status of population. So the commitment from the government is something very important to ensure that we have enough amount of money that is allocated to improve the nutrient status as well as health status of the population. Then comes the second level, which is underlying causes, primarily due to poor household food security, inadequate food, feeding, and care practices among populations. And also you will see the house, environment, and health services are not even available to some of the sections of this population, which actually results in inadequate dietary intakes, probably precipitating in disease, or you can see that it can lead to maternal and child undernutrition. Now, this is a very important scenario to be considered because the impact of maternal and child undernutrition has long or far-fetching impact on the further developmental mechanisms. The short-term consequences include mortality, morbidity, and disability, whereas the long-term consequences can be poor cognitive development, health, and lack of economic productivity among the populations or the younger generations of countries, which actually have intergenerational consequences, resulting in the probability of high risk for having chronic diseases in its epidemic proportion. Remember, what is the status of a mother would determine what the child is going to be and the future of the country to be. So this is something very, very important to consider when it comes to micronutrient malnutrition, the impact of this micronutrient malnutrition during in preconception stage, or as a young woman, or during pregnancy, or even post-delivery or postpartum, is something very, very important because it has impact that has far outreaching. Now, let's see some of the cause of micronutrient malnutrition and why is that we need to address this. Iron deficiency anemia is associated with 20% of all maternal deaths. Severe anemia is one of the foremost causes whereby you will see there is a hemorrhage as well as the death of mothers or a woman who is delivering, and she passes off quickly without much access to health care. 250 million preschoolers are vitamin A deficient, and as many as 5 lakh will go blind as a result of vitamin A deficiency. Now, half of these children who become blind die within a year of losing their sight. Remember, this is a kind of preventable tragedy that we can, and if we encourage children or if we provide them adequate amount of vitamin A, such loss of lives can be prevented. Iodine deficiency, as I mentioned earlier, impairs mental ability and reduces educational attainment and productivity, as a result influences the GDP of a country. How about folate deficiency? You will see that there is poor development for the fetus that is happening in the womb of the mother. As a result, you will see there is spinal bifida that is resulting due to vitamin B12 deficiency. This is often fatal and it can also lead to lifelong disability. So it is important that we tackle these micronutrient deficiencies so that we can improve the schooling and also gender equality among children, as well as we can prevent the loss of lives and ensure our children grow optimally with adequate cognitive development and they contribute to the growth and development of our country as a future citizen. So, how do we address the the micronutrient malnutrition? There are different ways that has been outlined by different national and international agencies. And if you look at the policy program responses, we actually focuses much importance to the food-based strategies because supplementation is a very short-term strategy. Ideally, supplements are to treat immediate and acute kind of scenario for any deficiency. However, if we have to handle them effectively, we need to have a combination of both short-term and long-term strategies. So if you look at the following strategies I have outlined here, dietary diversification is actually the most sustainable and effective one. However, it takes longest time to set in, so we need to be careful of it. However, we should thrust on food-based strategies that bring in optimum and sustainable eradication of micronutrient malnutrition. And then comes food fortification. Again, remember this has a less immediate effect, but however, it takes a shorter duration than the dietary diversification strategies. Nutrition education should go parallel with both short and long-term strategies. Public health and food safety measures are important to ensure safe and healthy diets reaching population. Supplementation will see the fastest result for cure of micronutrient deficiencies. Now, one should consider that these are all complementary to each other and it depends on the local conditions and the specific mix of local needs and also the intensity of the problem or the severity of the problem that we need to address. So, in that kind of scenario, let us see what is food fortification contributing to. We can say that food fortification is ranked one of the more highest return interventions in global development. Now, if we have to understand food fortification, what exactly do we mean by food fortification? And what are the foods that are fortified in India to reduce micronutrient malnutrition in our populations? So if we look into the definition, as Dr. Neha mentioned, it is a practice of deliberately increasing the content of an essential micronutrients in food to improve nutrient quality of the food and also to provide public health benefit with minimal risk to health, which means that we add nutrients to the foods to improve the availability or to increase the availability and to fulfill the recommended dietary allowances of the population. Now, talking about these recommended dietary allowances, remember these are the ones we need to meet on a day-to-day basis. And often with the current dietary food patterns, you will see dietary or food pattern, you will see that we need around 50 to 60% of it from our food. So naturally, we need additional amount of nutrients that is coming in through food because food nutrients from food are better absorbed and better bioavailable than the nutrients from supplements. So we should always encourage having food-based strategies compared to have the chemical supplements that is going into the body. So if you look at the commonly fortified foods, some of it are available in India, some of it are not available. I will just mention that. Salt, now we have double. If we take salt, we will see that we have different varieties of salt available in India. Now we have double fortified salt, which is available, developed by the National Institute of Nutrition, where they actually add iodine and iron to the salt to fortify it. We have wheat available. Maize is not available, but maize flours are fortified in African countries. And often you will see that we have iron, folic acid, B vitamins, vitamin A, and zinc that are added to wheat flour. Cooking oils and fats, vitamin A and D is actually channelized through cooking oils. Let me tell you, India is one of the foremost countries to initiate this program. In fact, Vanaspati was actually, India started fortifying Vanaspati from 1953, one of the pioneering work we have done to reduce the vitamin A and vitamin D deficiencies in the country. However, we have not reached to that level where we can withdraw this fortification. Sugar is considered as a vehicle for vitamin A, especially in Indonesia and Southeast Asian countries and also African countries where this problem predominates. Condiments are used in case for iron. Milk is fortified with vitamin A and D and also iron. Complementary foods which are provided to children, small children, you will see below 2 years, you will see that iron, folic acid, B vitamins, vitamin A, and zinc are often used for fortification. Now, the success story I have to give you here is, I can't help without going through this, is that Odisha model has actually commendably improved the nutritional status of children. And what did they do? They actually fortified the rice with nutrients, especially iron, because the children in Odisha have a very high prevalence of iron deficiency anemia. And the rice actually produced is not biofortified, meaning it is not added to the crops, but the rice is externally fortified. So what they did was actually they manufactured it by combining the rice powder with iron, and the powder was back converted to the rice-like kernels. Now, these rice-like kernels were actually used in the midday meal program for many of the children in Gajpati district. And it is found to be very beneficial. The initial results indicate that this is one of the best ways to improve the iron status of children. And especially when it is done under monitored conditions, this actually helps in overcoming the challenges of excess of iron going into the diets of population. I would say that fortification is a $1 billion business. Now, for that matter, many of you may think that if it is a $1 billion business, do you think that it is reachable to the poor population? Well, our government has been very committed, and many of these fortification processes have been, or the programs have been subsidized by the government intervention. And that is why I said the political drive and commitment is something very important for the success of fortification programs. Of course, there are other industry people who play a very important role in contributing to the success as well. So the rice fortification was introduced in 2019. The wheat fortification came into effect in 2018. The milk fortification was started much earlier in 2017. And then comes the edible oil fortification, which was started in 2018. Now, if you look at the rice and the wheat fortification, you will see that often rice and wheat in India are fortified with mainly 3 micronutrients: iron, B12, and folic acid. Now, if you look at the fortification cost, the cost for rice fortification is much higher, And you will see that this is higher because the requirement is also higher. Over India, the whole India consumes rice, but wheat is primarily limited to the northern states of India. So naturally, the cost comes a bit lower. Whereas for milk, you will see that it is again touching 1080 crores of rupees for fortification. So if I give you this context, you might be wondering, what is that effect that we have out of this enormous expenditure? I will take to you that level just a moment. Before I go to that, let me tell you, any fortified food in India should have this symbol. So next time when you visit your supermarkets, I hope after COVID you are able to go and explore yourself. You will see that you can see this plus F symbol as fortified Sampurna Portion Swasth Jeevan symbol. This has been developed by Food Standards Safety Authority of India, FSSAI. And even at home, if you have food items, which I'll show you some of them, you can see that this symbol might be available. If it is not, then it is not properly fortified. So make sure you choose something with this symbol for your use. So what is the benefit of fortification? As I mentioned, it has a very high benefit to cost ratio. The Copenhagen Consensus estimated that for every 1 rupee spent on fortification, there results in 9 rupees in benefits to the economy. So you can imagine the investment we make in terms of um, uh, fortification, almost 9 times we are benefiting or reaping the rewards of it, provided the populations use these fortified foods to improve their nutrient status. Now, most of the time, you will see that the foods that are widely used as staple food, meaning used on a regular basis, they are actually used for fortification. For example, rice, wheat, salt, oil, all and milk. These are essentials in every household. Naturally, you will see that they are being used as a vehicle to carry the nutrients so that a large group of people can be reached instantly through the use of these fortified food items. And often you will see that it's a safe method for improving nutrition of people and does not cause any health risk. Why? Because we add very small quantities of these nutrients which are below recommended dietary allowances. For example, if you think the dietary allowances, recommended dietary allowances for iron for adult is 30, then we often consider that around 30 to 60% of iron only should come from food fortification, because you consume not just these food items, but you consume a mix of diet, and some of you consume even iron supplements. So that we don't move into a kind of scenario of toxicity. That is why we aim at giving a lower dose of nutrients through food, but they are in the most efficacious and easily bioavailable form that can be easily available to the system for effective functioning. As I mentioned, all these food items are chosen because they are socially and culturally acceptable, so that people are not reluctant to use them, and without altering the taste and aroma or texture of the food, the fortification process is carried out. So there are multiple benefits. When you consume these food, you don't find any different taste or any texture change, so that you feel that you're consuming a normal food item. I'll give you some examples of fortified foods in India. So the first one to give the success story to is that iodized salt. I would say that no other program in India have been so successful as iodized salt in reducing the spectrum of iodine deficiency disorders. So if India has eliminated, I would use that term elimination, I would say that it was through the introduction of universalization of salt iodine so iodized salt program. So if we to consider iodized salt program success, probably it would be nice to have a double fortified salt, which can even have iron added to it to improve the availability of both iron and iodine. Now, why do we need to have such a kind of double fortified salt? Remember, as I mentioned in my first slide, the deficiency of one micronutrient accentuates the deficiency symptoms of other micronutrients. And there had been evidence from different studies in low and middle income countries that when population are deficient in iodine, you just supplement them with iron, the anemia or iron deficiency scenario doesn't respond to such programs. So it is a very ideal scenario to have a double fortified salt, and we have multiple different varieties of salts which are approved by FSSAI that would provide 30 to 60% of daily dietary iron requirement for people who use or consume. And this is considered as a very sustainable program to improve the iron and iodine deficiencies in varied populations. Another example I would provide here is fortification of milk. Now, you know that we all know that children consume milk as a primary source of food. Fortifying milk with vitamin A and D have been very beneficial in improving the uptake of these nutrients. And you will see that when you boil the milk, naturally vitamin A and D are lost. And when milk fat is removed as a process of removal of cream, you will see that they go often lost from the food item. Whereas if you could fortify this, it would have been much better because it improves the level of nutrient availability, especially for young children and adults, particularly in urban settings who are less physically active and they get less outside sunlight to prevent the vitamin D deficiency. And in a way, we can say that this is a kind of replenishment we do to the nutrients which are lost during the processing and they are added back to the milk. So, this is another important food that is often fortified in India. And you will see that I've given examples that actually the milk available in different parts of the country. Some of these are available from the southern states, some of them are available from the northeast state, or some are available from the western states. Now, if you look at the edible oils, see, I put a disclaimer here, I'm not propagating any brands, but I'm just giving you some examples which are fortified and available in the markets. If anyone is interested, could use these oils. There are multiple types of oils available. And according to the household consumer expenditure survey in India, the NSSO report showed that Indians consume on an average 20 to 30 gram of oil per day per person. So oil consumption is observed across all the population group, and this was found to be one of the important vehicle if we had to fortify oil with vitamin A and D being fat soluble in nature. And also through fortified oil, we can get around 25 to 30% of the recommended dietary allowances of vitamin A and D. And as I mentioned, India was one of the foremost countries to come up with the fortification of vitamin A for vanaspati, which is heavily used in the various snacks and savories that are prepared in India. Now, some of the examples that I'm going to talk about is about rice and wheat, which are very cost-effective, culturally appropriate strategy to address micronutrient deficiencies in India. In India, we have fortified rice and wheat with three important nutrients that are hemopoietic in nature, required for the hemoglobin synthesis as well as blood formation, that is B12, folate, and iron. Now, fortifying rice makes it more nutritious, and also whatever loss during the post-harvest losses can be compensated, and also in, for example, the milling and the processing, the polishing processes removes many of these nutrients, especially the B complex nutrients, And when you fortify rice with these nutrients, you can see that it adds to the additional availability of micronutrients to populations. And rice is a staple food for more than 65% of Indian population, and it reaches the most vulnerable groups of population, especially through some of the safety net programs in India. I'll be just mentioning about these safety net programs as I complete the fortified foods. Some of it includes the Public Distribution System of India, Midday Meal Program, and the ICDS, which is one of the flagship program of Government of India to improve the nutritional status of women and children, Indian children. Then comes the fortified wheat. Again, the three micronutrients, iron, folic acid, and B12, is often used for fortifying the wheat flour. The northern, western, and northeastern states are heavily rely on the wheat as a staple. So adding all these three nutrients have found to be beneficial to the population in improving the anemia prevalence as well as in providing adequate amount of these nutrients to the population. And I hope you are able to recollect and see which are the brands you use at home and whether you are getting all these nutrients from the fortified wheat. Now, as I mentioned, some of the safety net programs in India include integrated child development services, and these ICDS centers are available or are constituted in each of these villages in India. The rural populations greatly benefit with Anganwadi centers, popularly we call as Anganwadi, because these are actually available at the doorsteps for children to, for parents to make use of for children under 6 years of age. So I would say that Government of India has very thoughtfully introduced this program in 1975, and this is operational since 35 years in our country, improving or contributing to the health and nutritional status of mothers and children. And even you will see that many of the grassroots level kind of programs are being introduced through Anganwadi centers. Now let's see the public distribution system, as we popularly call it as ration shops in India. The government's food security system is actually operating through these public distribution system. You have all these ration shops that provides some of the items like wheat, rice, sugar, and kerosene to the below poverty line population. Some of these wheat, rice are actually fortified. Now, there are some changes depending on the states. Some of the states introduce iodized salt, pulses, spices, edible oil, which is again fortified through PDS outlets. So population, the below poverty line population have an opportunity to use these kind of foods that are fortified to improve the nutrient levels in their food. If you look at the rice fortification that is happening, you will see that these are done usually at the Food Corporation of India centers, where you will see that the rice is procured, and often you will see it is done, it is sent for milling, and then immediately they are being fortified. Whereas in case of wheat flour, you will see that the fortification need to be done at the godown level, where the state tenders the millers to convert the wheat grain into wheat atta and fortifying the wheat as per FSSAI standards. The last one in this here is the midday meal program, which is operational. Again, it's one of the flagship programs for Government of India, aiming at enhancing the school attainment or the school enrollment, retention, and attendance for rural children as well as urban children. Now, many of these schools have midday meals freely available to the children to attract them to the schools, encourage them to study in the school, and also provide them with adequate nutrient-rich meal to ensure adequacy in nutrient availability. So when improving nutritional levels are aimed at, government, local body, and government aided primary and upper primary schools are benefited out of these programs. Now, along with that, you will see that there are other centers that support such programs like Education Guarantee Scheme, Alternative and Innovative Education, and National Child Labor Project, where they help them to implement the midday meal program. And even in the drought affected areas of India, midday meal programs are available, ensuring that children, even when they are adversely poised due to natural calamities, the government of India's attempt to support children to ensure adequate growth and development through midday meal schemes. So, to summarize the entire presentation, I would reiterate that micronutrient malnutrition in India is a public health challenge. Multiple micronutrient deficiencies coexist in Indian populations, especially among women and children, and often they are called as vulnerable population. Food fortification is one of the best strategies to improve the nutrient status and prevent or reduce the intensity of micronutrient malnutrition. And often the major 5 foods that are identified and fortified in India are staple are used on a day-to-day basis are the rice, wheat, fortified milk, oil, and double fortified salt. So the success of controlling iodine deficiency disorders in India has been solely attributed to the use of iodized salt. On a similar manner, in the recent years, Government of India have committed a large amount of money to address other micronutrient deficiencies in population through food fortification programs. So with these, I conclude my presentation. I request all of you to use fortified food items so that you have lesser risk of developing micronutrient malnutrition. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your valuable insights on this topic. I must say that a good nutrition is not just about having enough food, but I guess about having the right food at right time. So, the food fortification serves as one of the important steps in making sure that population gains a balanced diet. After such an enlightening session, I can speculate that many of them must be eager to get answers to their queries. So, with your permission, ma'am, we can start with the question and answer sessions.
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Okay. Ma'am, one of the students has asked that what chemicals can be added as preservatives or additives in canned juices or processed food?
So if we are to talk about the different preservatives, there are multiple preservatives that are available, and they have been actually graded as class 1, class 2, class 3, depending on the nature and the chemical constituents. Now, the use of these preservatives in juices have to be done very carefully because juices contain alkaloids as well as coloring agents. So you have to be wisely choosing which preservative you should use in which juice. For example, if you are to fortify tomato juice, sorry, if you use preservative for tomato juices, it has to be something related to sodium benzoate or any of those so that the color is not bleached. You cannot imagine a tomato juice without red color. So it has to be aligned to the type of juice, the nature of the fruit, as well as the type or the class of the preservative.
Thank you, ma'am. It was really interesting, and the example of, I guess, tomato ketchup would be the most relevant example to all of us because it is a most household item that we are using in our
Exactly.
day-to-day life. Ma'am, one of the students has also asked that is food fortification only the way to achieve the daily micronutrients to meet up to our daily essential, what we can say, calorie requirement if they are not naturally present in the food?
Okay, so there are two aspects to this question, Neha. I see that calorie requirement has to be achieved by appropriate use of macronutrients. For example, the amount of protein, carbohydrate, and fat you consume in your daily diet that contributes to your calorie. However, if you are to consider your micronutrient requirement, a balanced and conscious diet of course, will help you to fulfill your requirements. However, considering the current dietary pattern where we often see that majority of the population consume fast and junk foods and food items that are heavily laid in oil, salt, and sugar, we wouldn't ensure that we have adequate availability of these micronutrients. So that is the reason government has gone one step ahead and fortified the food so that whatever form you see, for example, if you are using wheat, you are not always making chapati only. You may be making many other items also when you are having wheat at home. One of the popular thing we often make at home is a diamond cut, a very simple and easy one, and often liked by children, which is very crispy and nicely, it could be even flavored with some nice herbal herbs or spices. So if you, it doesn't mean that only chapati will give you these nutrients, but in any other form you use this wheat, it would definitely provide some amount of nutrients. So now, having given that perspective, fortification is not the only way to attain it. As I mentioned in my earlier part of part of this presentation, if we are having an acute necessity, acute deficiency of this micronutrients, supplements are the best way to go. We need to fulfill that, we need to reduce the risk of getting into adverse effects, or I would say adverse effects of deficiency. Hence, we need to supplement with dietary supplements. Once we are better, I mean, cleared of all the signs and symptoms of this deficiency, you don't have to remain in the supplement, but you can use fortified food and most importantly, diversified diets to reduce the risk of further deteriorating to the deficiency levels.
Okay. Considering the time limit constraint, I guess I can hardly accommodate only a single question now. There are many queries, I can understand. So, one last question, ma'am. Can you tell that is food fortification a cost-effective strategy and how it affects the cost of food basket for average consumer?
Very good question, interesting, and I myself am very much convinced about the effects of food fortification. As I mentioned, the Copenhagen Consensus, before supporting the food fortification by different countries, have conducted a cost-benefit analysis. Based on that cost-benefit analysis, we could find that, as I reiterate, 1 rupee spent on food fortified, you will see that the return is almost 9 times. Now, this 9 times is inclusive of the amount of money we spend on supplements if you get a disease, or the developmental delays that happen as a result of deficiencies. As I mentioned, some of these deficiencies actually have long-term consequences. For example, I mentioned about iodine deficiency. Not Initially, we used to believe that the severe and moderate iodine deficiency is catastrophic and it used to lead to mental retardation. But there was a classic study from University of Otago among children which looked into the clinical deficiency, to the mild iodine deficiency among children, and still they had cognitive delays. And consider New Zealand as a very developed country where other nutrient deficiencies doesn't coexist in children. We have to be all the more careful for low and middle income countries where multiple micronutrient deficiencies coexist, and we may have much more higher levels of risk for cognitive delays and poor mental growth of children. And mental growth is something we cannot compromise because our children are our future of our country.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your wonderful insights on this topic. So, with this interesting session by Dr. Kavita Menon, ma'am, I thank you all delegates. I thank you, ma'am. And
Thank you.
let us now conclude the session for today.
Thank you, Neha. Thank you for your insights and support. Much appreciate for this opportunity to the organizers.
My pleasure, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Sarath and Dr. Rajiv, for giving this wonderful opportunity to share some insights on food fortification. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.